The morning it all came crashing down literally, I stepped out of the house to the deafening grind of metal on concrete. A bulldozer was halfway down our driveway and the roof of the tunnel beneath it had already begun to collapse. Sirens echoed in the distance. My grandmother stood on the porch in tears. And there she was, Madeline Archer, the HOA president, standing with a glass of iced tea like she'd just ordered a pizza. Not initiated the destruction of federal property. What she didn't know. That tunnel was built in 1952 by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What she had just done wasn't just reckless, it was a federal crime. But let me rewind, because I know what you're thinking. How does someone pull this off without realizing what they're doing? Or more importantly, how do they think they're allowed to? Believe me, I've been asking myself the same questions since the most aggressive HOA this side of the Mississippi decided to play demolition derby with a Cold War-era bunker like they were auditioning for some post-apocalyptic home renovation show. Before the flashing lights, the headlines, the federal agents, it all started with one tunnel, a clipboard, and a woman who looked like she'd sue a squirrel for excessive chirping. I'd moved into my grandparents' house last year after my grandfather passed. At first, it was just supposed to be temporary, a place to land while I figured things out. But the house started to feel like more. It was old, made of stone and brick with ivy crawling up the walls like veins trying to keep the past alive. My grandfather had built part of it with his own hands. The other part? Government issue. Underneath the hill behind the house was a concrete tunnel that led to a bunker, one of those Cold War shelters that the U.S. Army Corps used to construct. Reinforced, hidden, built to last. It wasn't just a relic, it was registered as a historic structure. To my family, it was a legacy. Grandpa used to tell me how he helped build it under the Corps' supervision, hush-hush work from a time when fallout shelters were the norm. I grew up treating that tunnel like a personal playground, one day a secret lab, the next a hidden rebel base. It was part of our story. And then came Madeline. She moved in 3 months ago. Freshly printed HOA badge, clipboard in hand, and the smug authority of someone who once got a taste of power and never looked back. She'd recently been elected HOA president in what I later learned was a quiet midweek vote held at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. Most neighbors didn't even know it happened. I sure didn't. One day she was just the woman who got too involved in other people's gardens. The next, she had control and a vendetta to match. First notice I got was about my trash cans being visible from the street. Next came one about the mailbox not meeting neighborhood aesthetics. But the third? That one was different. It claimed I had an unauthorized underground structure on the property that could be a safety hazard and violated the HOA's uniform design principles. She meant the tunnel. The one built by the Army. The one older than she was. At first, I laughed. Surely a mistake, right? I invited her over for tea, trying to be neighborly, and handed her every document I had: the state historical designation, the Army Corps' original construction authorization. Even a newsletter from the local preservation society praising it as a forgotten Cold War gem. She flipped through them like they were junk mail, gave me a smile so condescending I almost dropped my teacup, and said, "This isn't a museum, dear. It's a neighborhood. And we don't allow creepy tunnels." I calmly reminded her that the structure predated the HOA by decades. She dismissed it all. Said she'd consulted a compliance expert and that the tunnel needed to be decommissioned. I laughed. She didn't. That's when I realized she wasn't bluffing. She thought she could overwrite federal records with a line in her HOA manual. She wasn't just on a power trip. She'd built a throne out of her own ignorance and sat proudly on it. Then came the letters. The warnings. The fines. I replied, each time politely and thoroughly, citing legal exemptions, forwarding documents. She ignored them all. At one point, she claimed someone from zoning told her the structure didn't meet current seismic codes. From a woman who once rearranged patio chairs to maximize lawn unity, this was rich. Then I found her one morning standing in my garden, staring down at where the tunnel curved under the earth, clipboard in hand. She hadn't knocked. Wasn't invited. When I confronted her, she said, "Just a visual audit." I asked her to leave. She rolled her eyes and said, "I'm documenting noncompliance." My grandmother, bless her, started asking if we were going to lose the house. I assured her we weren't. But with people like Madeline, you can never be too sure. And then she bulldozed it. Literally. I woke up to the sound of a bulldozer grinding across our driveway. Ran outside. The tunnel's roof was collapsing. The dirt was caving in. Sirens blared. Neighbors thought there was a gas explosion. Madeline stood at the edge, iced tea in hand, like a general watching a battlefield she'd conquered. This was overdue, she said. You just destroyed a federally protected structure, I told her. Built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In 1952. She blinked. A twitch in her smile. She had no idea. But I did. I called the State Preservation Board right then and there. The firefighters showed up first. Then county inspectors. Then state officials. I handed them every document. The bulldozer operator looked pale. Said he was told by Madeline to clear debris. He didn't know what he was demolishing. Madeline? Still smug. Until one firefighter radioed his chief. We're gonna need preservation here. Maybe state. Maybe federal. That's when Madeline flinched. Next came the guy from the Army Corps. Looked like he hadn't left his office in a decade. But he knew exactly what he was looking at. This the 1952 shelter with dual concrete layers and vertical exhaust shafts, he asked. I nodded. He turned to Madeline and said, Do you know what you've done? She tried to pivot. Safety concerns. Visual hazards. Community standards. He wasn't buying it. This is registered on multiple federal lists, he said. It's not your jurisdiction. Madeline stammered. Tried to cite common area mitigation policies. But it was over. The law was not on her side. Not even close. Within 48 hours, the HOA's insurance refused to cover damages. The demolition was unauthorized. The liability? All on Madeline. Then came the investigation. The state. Legal counsel. I got a call from an attorney who'd taken down zoning boards for fun. He said this case was a goldmine. I handed over everything. Emails, doorbell footage, even her sign notices. One email. She wrote to another board member, I don't care if it's on some dusty list. It's ugly. It's coming down. That made the news. The HOA fractured. 2 members resigned. One said they didn't even know about the demo. The treasurer flipped, claimed Madeline used reserve funds without a vote. Neighbors began to turn. Fast. Past grievances surfaced. Fines for mailboxes. Citations for Christmas lights. A parody Instagram popped up, Madeline's manifesto. Meanwhile, I was working with preservationists. Engineers. Historians. They reviewed my grandfather's original blueprints and nearly cried. This is Cold War gold, one said. We began plans for full restoration, state-funded, media-supported. Madeline still hadn't apologized. But when the state filed a civil suit against her official, sealed deliver, her silence cracked. At an emergency HOA meeting, she tried to speak, tried to explain. One elderly neighbor stood and said, You didn't destroy it for safety. You destroyed it because you didn't like how it looked. That's not leadership. That's vandalism in a pantsuit. Applause. The vote to remove her was unanimous. That night, she packed up and left the clubhouse for the last time. Word spread she was trying to sell her house. No takers. The listing became infamous. 6 months later, the tunnel was restored. The site was designated for monthly educational tours. My grandmother, in her Sunday best, led the first one, pointing out old vent systems and places I used to draw with crayons as a kid. And then the final twist. I got an email from the Historical Society. They'd hired a new assistant for Cold War outreach. Community liaison. Name, Madeline Archer. Apparently, court-mandated community service took an unexpected turn. Poetic, really? The same woman who tried to erase history was now assigned to preserve it. On tour day, as we stood at the tunnel's entrance, watching families walk through the cold concrete hallway, I realized something. Madeline brought a bulldozer to a fight with history. And history won.